So good morning, everybody. Welcome to St. Croix Church. Yeah, it's so good to have everybody here. And we're inside. This is only our second time inside. It's our third? Okay. All right, our third time inside. But, so we've got a few songs, and then Walter's going to be speaking to us. So much hurt and preservation, like a tendril around my soul. There's so much painful information, no clear way on how to hold it. Everything in me is curling in around this ache. I will lay my heart wide open, like the surface of a lake, wide open like a lake. Standing at this water's edge, looking in at God's own heart. I've no idea where to begin to swallow up the way things are, and everything in me drawing in, closing in around this pain. And I will lay my heart wide open, like the surface of a lake, wide open like a lake. Over, bring me stillness. Let my face reflect the sky, and all the grace and all the wonder of a peace that I can't fake, wide open like a lake. Everything in me is tied to me, curling in around this ache. And I'm fighting to stay open. I'm fighting to stay open. Oh So welcome everybody who's come in along the way. Welcome to St. Clair Church, and of course we're inside, so respecting social distancing is, I really do need to remind you to do that. But please feel at home and welcome here. I'm going to play a couple more songs, and then there'll be some announcements, or maybe not. I don't know. And Walter will speak. Just gotta make sure I get the right key. So Wendy and I were just talking about, I mean, at least for me, the last time that I was inside a church for a service was back in March when we did the Queerly Grafted service, evening service here. And that was the last time I played music in the church, which was an awesome night. But one of the songs that I took away from that, which is amazing, is called "The Summons." And it's written by John Bell from the Iona community. And it's a song full of questions, but questions that draw you in and ask you to live into your full self. So I'll sing it, and I don't expect you to know all the words, but feel free to hum along. The melody is lovely and uplifting, and let the words sink into your spirit. Will you come and follow me if I call your name? Will you go where you don't know and never be the same? Will you let my love be shown? Will you let my name be known? Will you let my life be grown in you and you in me? Will you leave yourself behind if I but call your name? Will you care for cruel and kind and never be the same? Will you risk the hostile stare? Should your life attract or scare? Will you let me answer prayer and you in me? Will you let the blinded see if I but call your name? Will you set the prisoner free and never be the same? Will you kiss the leper clean and do such as this unseen and admit to what I mean in you and you in me? Will you love the you hide if I but call your name? Will you quell the fear inside and never be the same? Will you use the faith you found to reshape the world around through my sight and touch and sound in you and you in me? echoes true when you but call my name. Let me turn and follow you and never be the same. In your company I'll go where your love and footsteps show. Thus I'll move and live and grow in you and you in me. In your company I'll go where your love and footsteps show. Thus I'll move and live and grow in you and you and me. Thus I'll move and live and grow in you and me. In your company I'll go where love and footsteps show. Thus I'll move and live and grow in you and you in me. Man, I really wish we could have the words and you could all be belting it out. And other times we all do that. So I'm going to read a poem and sing a song that I wrote. And this is something that will tie into what Walter will talk about later. And this couplet or this duo of poem and song go together, and they are from an experience I had quite a few years ago. Back in 2013, I went to Nicaragua as in a learning trip with some folks from the Canadian Food Grains Bank, and I had an interesting experience there as we were attending a service in Spanish, and it was I think one of the churches down there that the priests represents liberation theology. So we're really trying to speak social justice into some of the dire situations that are in Latin America, in particular. This was in Nicaragua. And this group of Canadians were sitting in the pews trying to understand everything that was being said, but as the interpretation came through, we were slowly realizing that as Canadians, we were being chastised by the priests for our complicitness in mining activities that were destroying some of the communities in Nicaragua. So I wrote this poem in response, and Walter's going to be talking about shame to some degree, and so this pair of poem and song he thought it could be a good fit to try to prepare our hearts, I guess, in a way, or elicit a response from us. So here we go. Here's the poem. It's called Liberation Theology. Some mining companies in Nicaragua have a skeleton and a maple leaf on the flag they drag. They have interests and machines and some government officials. They think people are the same as the dirt and the rock, pushed aside, hammered through, blasted apart. They put things on paper and it looks good to the politiques, but it is written from the ink of bodies without names. And I felt ashamed when a priest told me all of this in a language I did not understand. I've been wandering through the mouths of men, collecting, rejecting. The food you chew is poison to these veins, but it's addicting, and it's easier than God. You don't want to believe that your energy is ill-conceived. You don't want to see that you're killing me. You're giving me your dreams of digging graves to find your peace. Flesh and blood, oh, don't you know we're flesh and blood? Flesh and blood, oh, don't you know we're flesh and blood? Flesh and blood, oh, don't you know we're flesh and blood? Flesh and blood, oh, don't you know we're flesh and blood? You don't want to believe that your energy is ill-conceived. You don't want to see that you're killing me. You're feeding me your dreams of digging graves to find your peace. Flesh and blood, don't you know we're flesh and blood? Flesh and blood, don't you know we're flesh and blood? Walter's again. Oh, he's back. Yeah, I guess. I'm on another phone.
Just had nothing to say after that. Well, I guess Thanks so much, Ray, for that. I'm really glad you thought of doing the poem again too, because I hadn't even realized that one of the lines that I really wanted you to mention was in the poem, not the song. So awesome. I wanted to open the door because I wanted to make an announcement about the one piece of our official operational plan that we're needing to have in our whole COVID times that people may not understand, which is that officially we're meant to have a one-way traffic flow. So, and the point of that is that we don't congregate or clog up the stairwells or entrances. So So it's no big deal. No one's gonna chase you down and slap your wrist if you accidentally leave out that door. If it's free, but don't please clog up the stairwells or exits. You may feel like you're comfortable and bubbling with a lot of the people in the room, but other people may not feel the same way. So please be respectful of that. I just want to have a short prayer time before I give a talk, and I want to do it this way. It's not very different at all from what we sometimes do, but I want the prayer time to be almost entirely silent. And what I'd like you to do during the silence is think about one or two people, situations that you're particularly thinking about, concerned about. Maybe it's yourself, maybe it's someone else. Maybe it's some of the people moving away or moving here. Andy and Agnes are leaving us this afternoon. I assume something's gone in the truck. It was never talking what happened in the end yesterday.
Into the goals.
Everything except the office chair.
Everything except the office chair.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
That's mind-boggling. Rick's engineering genius is definitely a part of that, and it didn't look possible. And the Williams clan arriving tomorrow. So they may be among the people we're concerned about. We may have someone who's hurting in another way. And if you want to say their name, so that they're on other people's minds during the silence, you're welcome to do that, as we sometimes do. But mainly I want it to be a time of silence. And during the time of silence, what I want to invite you to think about is just to combine thinking about that person with trusting that God is present and trusting that God cares as much or way more for that situation, that person, than you do. And just to practice that trust for that moment of silence. So let's be silent a moment. During that silence, bring your care and bring your trust in God's presence and participation at the same time. Especially for our beloved travelers, God be present. For Andy and Agnes, full hearts and full vehicles, and the same for Jess and Ian and family. Be present, God. Thanks. Amen. So I told Pete a couple weeks ago he referred to a podcast by Brene Brown, and I told him that by doing that he'd plagiarize my talk today, which I'd already written some notes for. So I'm actually, partly because some of that has already been said, I wanted to change the emphasis a little bit in terms of what I'm going to talk about today, but I still want to mention that stuff, and especially I want to use Ray's poem and song as a jumping off place to do that, because the thing that Brene Brown was really mentioning was that one of the quotes that she's, I think, known for in recent days, and that she talks about really well. If you don't hear this well from the quote, listen to the podcast. It's really well done. Plus, you should just listen to her podcast anyway. And probably her podcasts are better than 99% of sermons in churches these days, I'm suspecting. Including this talk. But what she says is, shame is not a tool of social justice. And she says it just pretty bare bones. And I think what she means is shaming. And that's actually one of the distinctions I want to make. Because what Ray's poem and song is a great example of is how healthy shame can be a tool for social justice, but the trick is that it can be when there's connection, when there's compassion. That's there present first, because connection is the bridge that helps us to tolerate shame in a way that makes it helpful. And without connection, we just can't handle it. So we just get defensive and denying and fighting and hiding the things that we do, because shame is just too intolerable of an emotion if there's no connection to help you to stay in that place. So I want to just make just a few of those connections with shame, but mostly what I want to talk about is that space that we need to stay in, that connected space, that compassionate space. Because this is, as you're all super aware, continuing strange days, a very anxious season in the middle of an anxious era. Even before COVID, even before Trump was elected, this was a really anxious age. All kind of statistics that show that not even just normal everyday anxiety, but clinical anxiety, all very much on the increase. And that makes some understandings of compassion, I think, really, really important for us to remember, because what we don't always think of is that anxiety fights against compassion in a lot of ways. So that's one of the things that I want to talk about today. And I think one of the things, and Pete said this especially, I think, well, in the first gathering that we had since COVID started, where he referred to the fact that really the church is made for times like these, times that are particularly anxious and unsettled and chaotic and so on. And that was the situation when the church began, and the early church, and a very chaotic age full of change and oppression and all kinds of things. And not unlike where we are now. So what I do want to end up focusing on is emphasizing connection and love, and because these are such huge concepts, all the words connected, need to be explained a little bit. It's like there's a whole bunch of puzzle pieces connected with each of these words, and we have to always be in a dynamic way putting these pieces together to make sense of what's kind of a moving target. But I do want to start with a more ancient understanding and then build to something that's a little bit more contemporary. And here is a passage from Colossians that I want to read slowly and encourage you to think it. I'll read it through twice because it's always hard, especially without an overhead, to have. And I could have done an overhead, but we were hoping we would be outside. So this is Colossians 3:12-16. As God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, clothe yourselves with heartfelt compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. Bear with one another, and if anyone has a complaint against one another, forgive each other, just as the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. Above all, clothe yourselves with love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you are called in the one body. And be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly. Teach and admonish one another in all wisdom, and with gratitude in your hearts, sing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs to God. Before I read it the second time, I want to emphasize one thing that this was an emphasis that Pete actually gave in one of his talks from James. If you listen to any of those recordings that he did in his dining room, he mentioned in regard to James that this is a word to a community, not an individual. And if you read it that way and hear it that way, you hear it slightly differently than if you hear it read to an individual. And a lot of things, when we take it as an individual, it's too hard or like it feels like the bar is too high, or it even feels condemning, or something like that. But if you understand it as being a word to a community, it is a little easier to hear how it makes sense to aim for a high bar and to have a vision that guides us forward into these things. So hear this as a word particularly to a community, first to a community. As God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, clothe yourselves with heartfelt compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. Bear with one another, and if anyone has a complaint against another, forgive each other, just as the Lord has forgiven you. So you also must forgive. So above all, clothe yourselves with love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you are called in the one body, and be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly. Teach and admonish one another in all wisdom, and with gratitude in your hearts, sing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs to God. Okay, just a little background I want to mention in terms of some of those puzzle pieces that I want to swing together. One of the most ancient ways of understanding connectedness or love or compassion is a Hebrew word, chesed. It's just one of those super rich, beautiful old words. And one of the best translations in English might be covenant love, kind of like loyalty. And it's the idea that no matter what, I'm for you. Okay? No matter what, I'm for you. That's the force of the concept of chesed. So it's this sense of a commitment, of an understood bond, but also a felt solidarity. All of those things are part of that really ancient word. And very clearly, the New Testament writers, when they were using Greek, used the word agape. So some of you might have heard talks about that word. And one of the things that I meant to do and totally forgot in the end was to quote Martin Luther King on agape. Among the many people who have said some amazing things on the roots of that word and what it means and what it calls us to. But the roots of all that is in this Hebrew idea of chesed, and the New Testament writers were translating that word into the Greek, agape. Then there's another word, which is compassion, which is a word that a lot of us have been using, especially today, especially people connected with SSU are using it particularly because it's made its way into our trinity of values and our mission statement: justice, beauty, and compassion. And for me also, it's the word that comes up in the therapeutic research a lot as a little bit more of a defined word in therapeutic communities than the term love, which is a little too huge and vague and so on. So I've been using that word a lot. But in the older usages of the word compassion, which is I think a good thing to pay attention to, the word really focused on acts of compassion was what the word meant. It was when our choices of mercy, our actions of mercy, of grace, of care for others, particularly others in need or others who are suffering and so on. And that is at the heart of this word, compassion. In more modern context, the Dalai Lama has a definition of compassion that's used for a lot of people, and it's an openness to suffering with a wish to relieve it. It's that sense that we're willing to be present to suffering, as opposed to turning our backs on suffering or denying it or turning away from it. And this is where I just want to make one of those little bridges into that opening on shame is we have to have that compassionate desire and ability to be present to suffering in order for that shame to be an okay place to feel and for us to feel something different. But when we are connected with people, and I suspect everyone's had this, when you feel compassion towards someone and then you become aware, maybe through their truth telling, or maybe you just start to see something you didn't see before, and you see that you've caused pain or you've been a part of someone else's suffering, then of course we feel shame. And that shame can be really redemptive because we just hate for that to happen again, and we really want be motivated for change. Now I want to make a bridge to the really contemporary stuff. And it's not 100% contemporary, but it's this sense of embodiment that's starting to be talked about a lot in terms of concepts like compassion. Even to the point where some researchers are now using this as part of the definition for compassion, that it's a physiological state. That it's a physiological state. And the part that they're getting to is that we actually can't do compassion if we're not in a certain physiological state. Like if you're, some of the familiar terms might be, if you're in that fight or flight mode, like maybe because you're really anxious, or maybe you're defensive, or maybe you're angry, maybe you're worried that there's going to be a distraction and it's really fine. But you might be in a kind of an aroused mode that makes you unable to do compassion. And you can't do compassion in fight or flight mode. Like it's just not possible. You can have the commitment still, and that commitment might keep you from doing not compassionate things. But during that time when you're around, the tone of voice that you use, the facial expressions with which you're interacting with another person, like all the biological indicators with which we interact with people will not be compassionate. If you're in fight or flight mode, you're not using a compassionate tone of voice, you're not using compassionate facial expressions, you're not communicating compassion to someone. And same thing, you also don't receive it. Other people are being compassionate to you. While you're in that kind of state, you can't receive it because you're so busy trying to defend yourself and stay alive. And all your hormones are making it impossible for you to do that. On the other end, there's a kind of an under-aroused mode, which is, there hasn't been language that's taken the day, but it's sometimes called a freeze mode, or sometimes it's called the freeze and flop, or freeze and faint, or a variety of words. Freeze sticks, but the second F word to oops. Anyway, isn't sticking so far yet. But that's the one that paralyzes you, where you just want to shut down and turn off. And we've given up on connection. And also in that mode, you can't receive compassion. You can't give compassion when you're in that mode. So there's this sweet spot in between, and that's the state that we need to be in order to receive or express compassion, compassionate connection with other people. There's all kind of names for it if you want. I won't waste too much time on this, but I'll just show you how unhelpful some of them are. One of them is window of tolerance. It's kind of nice. There's the one that emphasizes the biological system involved, and that's the ventral vagal state. Catchy, right? So I hope you're in your ventral vagal state right now, and you're really open to me. As opposed to being in a dorsal vagal state, you don't want to do that. That's the freeze flop. Then the same guy, I think the guy whose languages, theories are connected with this, I think he realized that was not a good registered trademark, so he also uses the term social engagement system. Big step up. Yeah. Social engagement system. I kind of like just the compassionate space, right? Just in order to be in a compassionate space, your body also has to be in that compassionate space. And that's the thing I just want to focus on in the last part of what I want to say this morning. Because that's why we need that word to Colossians to be addressed to a community, not to individuals. Because we're all going to be anxious sometimes. We're all going to be angry sometimes. We're all going to be defensive sometimes. We're all going to be just overwhelmed with life sometimes and not be in that compassionate space. And that's when we need others to be compassionately present to us. And even if we can't take that in yet, we will start to be able to enter that space with them as they're present with us, and then start to come alive to compassion ourselves. And I think this is one of our biggest, most fundamental human callings, is to be people who are compassionately present to other people so that they can be compassionately present to other people, and so on. And it's a physiological thing. We have to emphasize. Rachel led us in the early service this morning, and was it during the time of silence before the talk, you said, like, maybe pay attention to your breathing a little bit, because that's one of the main things we can do is slow down our breathing, breathe more deeply. And there's actually a thing where if you delay the exhale, slow down the exhale more than the inhale, your body will calm down. Like, it can't not do it. It's like one of the body hacks that we have. And this is one of the reasons why humming or singing or all these other things help us, is because they automatically make us breathe right. When we're doing those things, we take a quick inhalation and then we slow down the exhale over a while. And they also, if you heard me say this before in my, I'm sure, famous talk on humming, I'm sure you've all been humming all the time since then. Humming is a double whammy, humming or singing, because not only does it make you breathe right, but the vagal, did you remember that word? The vagal nerve, which is part of that ventral vagal system, runs right alongside your larynx. So when you're humming or singing or even talking in a calm way, it's like you're giving a nice relaxing massage to your vagal system, and that's helping you get into that compassionate space, that social engagement system. So again, the thing I want to emphasize is this is the word to us as a community. Not that we feel condemned that we have a hard time staying in that space individually, because there's going to be times when it's super, super hard to stay in that space, especially when the world around you is going nuts and falling apart, or if you look on Facebook or the news, or like pretty crazy days. So we need all the practice we can get to try to stay in that space so that we stay compassionately present to each other. And if we're able to be in that space, we need to share that with other people as much as we can and try to make that possible for others. Here's some other specific things. I mentioned a few of them, but these are some other things that we can do that particularly help. Singing together, praying together, being silent together, even playing games together. Although I think Dutch Blitz doesn't count. I think Dutch Blitz is too competitive and too much adrenaline. I don't think you end up in that space. I think you end up in fight or flight mode all the time.
Too much opportunity.
But even, I particularly wanted to emphasize that because it's not part of my repertoire that I would normally mention, but I was listening to Stephen Porges, the researcher who's the guy behind the vagal system idea. And he was emphasizing that the ways in which we keep each other grounded and in that kind of space is anything positively interactive. Anything in which I respond and you respond and you respond and you respond, and we get into that kind of dance. Anything like that you do with each other helps you to be in that space. And so games can be really, really good at it if they're not too competitive. And then hopefully we can grow to not being only dependent on others to get into that space. And so we also want to be doing the personal practices alone that might help us to get in that space. Learning what kind of music do you listen to that you know does that for you. And just without even realizing it, Ray asked me for what songs you might sing. And then I didn't even tell him that first one is the one that I maybe associate with that more than anything else. For me, is that Like a Lake song. Because envisioning a quiet, still lake while you're hearing that kind of music is just really effective at helping you to do that. So what kind of music can you listen to that you know helps bring you into that sweet spot, that compassionate space where you're not over-aroused or under-aroused, but calm and able to be connected. Reading the right kinds of stuff, knowing the kind of authors that you can always just pick up and read a few pages of, and you think, oh, there are clear-headed people in this world, thank goodness. So people like Thomas Merton and Wendell Berry and Barbara Brown Taylor, and it's just all kind of people, like, know your favorites and listen to them and practice reading them. Going out for walks and paying attention to your senses, huge ability to do that kind of calming, if you can manage to get out of your head and paying attention to the birds and the trees and the breeze and the tides and wherever it is that you're walking. All of these things, different kinds of prayer exercises, the things you might most typically think of when you think of contemplative practices, all of these things are spiritual technologies, and they're physiological technologies, because those things are not separate at all. They're completely overlapped, and that's what we want to get good at individually, because the better we get at it individually, the more that we can help with the communal stuff, and vice versa. And that's all I wanted to say this morning. I think Ray's got a great song to close us with. So may you feel the compassion in his face as he sings that song.
Thanks, Walt. That's great. So, the song I'm going to sing is, this is an artist that I just found out about, but has been around for a long time. Martin Joseph. He's a Welsh folk singer that some of you may know. And this song is called "Still a Lot of Love." Maybe we can take Walter's recommendation and as the song is going, hum along, or slow down your breathing and slow that exhale, or visualize the place that you would like to be at a lake or something like that. Yeah. So. I don't know if this is going to relax you, but I'm going to try the harmonica on it too. So, for some it'll be relaxing. Well, maybe not for me. There you go. And I did I did just learn the song, so. Should be fine. Just have to remember how it goes. The light cracks the broken sky. Your kiss breaks my fall. Never easy coming down. To walk back the way we came, to understand what framed the day. Someone tell me that there's nothing to be frightened of right now. There's still a lot of love around here. There's still a lot of love. Still a lot of love, still a lot of love. That's the easy part for you. There's still a lot of love around here. There's still a lot of love, still a lot of love, still a lot of love. I've seen you with your head down, got your spirit on its knees, and you carry it so well. But you can't carry on forever, and at the end of that rope, my friend, there's a lot of good folk still pulling for you right now. There's still a lot of love around here. There's still a lot of love, still a lot of love, still a gave me space to walk away, and you gave me a heart, a home, my heart. I'm lost without you now. Some things just get broken. Sometimes some things can't be fixed, and that's the way I've got to see it right now. When light cracks the broken sky, and your kiss breaks my fall, it's never easy coming down. We walk back the way we came, we understand what framed the day. Come on, my love, there's nothing to be frightened of right now. There's still a lot of love around here. There's still a lot of love, still a lot of love, still a lot of love. There's still a lot of love around here. There's still a lot of love, still a lot of love, still a lot of love. There's still a lot of love around here. There's still a lot of love, still a lot of love, still a lot of love. There's still a lot of love around here. Still a lot of love, still a lot of love, still a lot of love. There's still a lot of love around here. Still a lot of love, still a lot of love, still a lot of love.
Thank you so much again. And I just remembered a closer that I forgot to say, which is the Greek word in that Colossians passage at the beginning where it says, have heartfelt compassion, is the sign that actually way back in the ancient days they did understand that bodily part, because what it says is compassion that you feel in your gut. So hope you felt a little bit of that. Awesome. Excellent closing. Thank you. All right. Have a great day, week. See ya.